Poor girl tries to wash CEO's car for coins, but her bracelet reveals a secret that shocks him. Could a chance encounter in a parking lot reunite a family torn apart by tragedy? When CEO Grayson Cole spots a familiar silver bracelet on the wrist of a poor girl washing his car, he has no idea it holds the key to an 18-year mystery and a shocking revelation about his own lost sister that will change his world forever. Subscribe, like, and listen to the full story now to uncover the unbelievable truth. Tao Tong Quan Bang and Tom the glare off the black Tesla's hood was intense, reflecting the harsh midday sun of a late Minnesota summer. Grayson Cole barely registered the heat shimmering off the asphalt of the downtown Crestwood parking lot. His focus was snagged, arrested by a glint of silver against the grime-streaked wrist of the girl scrubbing relentlessly at his car's tires. She couldn't have been much older than 14, maybe 15, thin and wiry in oversized, faded jeans and a worn band t-shirt. Her brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that did little to keep strand from sticking to her sweaty temples. He'd barely processed her polite, hesitant offer. "Wash your car, sir. Only $5. Before agreeing, more out of a detached sense of pity than any real need for the service. He'd been preoccupied, his mind already leaping ahead to the quarterly earnings call scheduled in less than an hour. But now time seemed to stall. As the girl, Ellie she'd called herself, moved to wipe down the passenger side door handle, the sunlight caught the charm on the simple, woven silver bracelet she wore. It was a small, five-pointed star, slightly tarnished with age and wear. Engraved almost imperceptibly on its surface, he knew, would be a single, looping capital. Grayson's breath hitched. The world tilted. The sounds of the city, distant traffic, the chatter of pedestrians, faded into a dull roar. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Yet there it was. A ghost made manifest in cheap silver on the wrist of a child washing cars for pocket change. 18 years. 18 years of silence, of aching void, of a wound that never truly healed, ripped open by the sight of that specific, unmistakable bracelet. He felt the blood drain from his face, his hand instinctively reaching out as if to touch an apparition. His voice, when he finally found it, was a ragged whisper, completely alien to the cool, controlled tone of the CEO he usually inhabited. Where did you get that bracelet?" Grayson Cole, at 35, commanded a world of polished steel, shimmering glass, and complex algorithms. From his corner office on the top floor of the Coltech Tower, downtown Crestwood spread out below him like a circuit board, intricate and orderly. His company, a leader in applied artificial intelligence and predictive analytics, was his creation, built from grief, ambition, and an almost obsessive need for control in a world that had proven terrifyingly chaotic. Coltech's success was undeniable. Grayson himself a celebrated figure in the tech industry. Young, brilliant, self-made, and notoriously private. His life was a carefully curated landscape of board meetings, international flights, strategic investments, and sterile luxury apartments. He dated occasionally, maintained cordial relationships with industry peers, but allowed few people close. His tailored suits were armor, his sharp intellect a shield. Beneath the surface, however, Grayson lived in a perpetual echo chamber of loss. 18 years ago, when he was a lanky, awkward 17-year-old more interested in coding than college parties, his world had shattered. His 10-year-old sister, Amelia, bright, bubbly, with eyes the same deep blue as his own, had vanished from a crowded suburban park during a family picnic just outside Minneapolis. One moment, she was chasing a butterfly near the wood's edge. The next, she was gone. no vichnesis, no hangso noch, no tresi. The investigation yielded nothing but dead ends and mounting despair. The aftermath was devastating. His parents' marriage crumbled under the weight of grief and blame, ending in a bitter divorce. His father retreated into alcoholism, passing away years later. His mother became a fragile shell, moving to a quiet coastal town, their contact infrequent and strained. Grayson, left adrift, poured all his energy, all his rage and sorrow, into the fledgling tech ideas he'd once shared excitedly with Amelia. Coal tech became his refuge, his obsession, a way to impose order on a universe that had stolen his sister. He rarely spoke of Amelia, the pain still too raw, the questions too consuming. But memories ambushed him in quiet moments. Her infectious laugh, her uncanny ability to beat him at chess, the afternoon they'd spent in the garage, Grayson patiently teaching her how to twist silver wire into simple jewelry. He remembered her delight as he'd fashioned the star bracelet, carefully engraving the tiny on the back with his Dremel tool. It was a unique design, born from a shared inside joke about her being his superstar assistant. He'd never seen another one like it. It was a tangible piece of a past he desperately tried to outrun, but could never escape. His success felt hollow, the Crestwood skyline a cold comfort, because the driving force behind it all stemmed from that single, catastrophic day 18 years ago when the brightest star in his life had simply blinked out. The August afternoon was suffocatingly humid as Grayson exited the Coltech Tower, his mind churning over server latency issues and the upcoming presentation. He usually had his driver, Mark, handle the Tesla, but Mark had called in sick, forcing Grayson into the rare task of navigating downtown traffic himself. He'd found a spot in a public lot a few blocks from the building where his next meeting was scheduled, a concession to the city's perpetual parking shortage. That's when he saw her. The girl, Ellie, stood beside a battered plastic bucket filled with murky water, holding a large, dripping sponge. A piece of cardboard leaned against the bucket, the words "Car Wash $5" scrawled in black marker. She looked small and out of place against the backdrop of luxury sedans and SUVs. There was a weariness in her young face, but also a surprising determination in her stance. When their eyes met, she straightened slightly. "Wash your car, sir. Do a real good job." Her voice was quiet but clear, lacking the practice pitch of someone used to soliciting work. Grayson, usually adept at politely deflecting such encounters, found himself pausing. Maybe it was the heat or the unexpectedness of it. Maybe it was something in her clear, direct gaze that reminded him fleetingly of, "No." He pushed the thought away. "It's pretty dirty," he said, gesturing towards the dust-coated Tesla, a hint of a challenge in his voice. "I can handle it," she replied with a nod, her expression serious. She immediately set to work with an earnestness that surprised him, meticulously soaping and scrubbing, her thin arms moving with practiced efficiency. He leaned against the neighboring vehicle, checking emails on his phone, trying to ignore the faint pang of unease the girl's circumstances stirred in him. He made a mental note to give her $20, maybe $50. Then, as she reached across the passenger side to wipe down the window trim, her sleeve hitched up. The silver bracelet glinted. Time stopped. This repeats the hook moment, but adds the preceding context. His carefully constructed composure fractured. The world narrowed to that single point of light on her wrist. The star charm. The woven band. It was Amelia's bracelet. It had to be. But how? After 18 years? On the wrist of a destitute teenager washing cars in a parking lot hundreds of miles from where Amelia disappeared? He barely registered asking the question, his voice hoarse. "Where did you get that bracelet?" Ellie looked up, startled by his abrupt change in tone. She glanced down at her wrist, touching the charm almost unconsciously. This? My mom gave it to me. Said it was special. I've had it forever. Forever. The word hung in the air. Grayson felt a dizzying mix of emotions. Disbelief, confusion, a terrifying surge of hope so potent it felt like pain. Coincidence? It felt too specific, too impossible. His mind raced. Who was her mother? Where did she get it? This girl, Ellie. Could she be connected? The idea was insane, yet the bracelet was undeniably real, a physical link to his lost sister. He fumbled for his wallet, pulling out $100 bill, pressing it into her soapy hand. "Keep it," he said, his voice still unsteady. Ellie stared at the money, then at him bewildered. "But it's only $5. I know." "Listen, Ellie." Grayson struggled to sound casual, normal. I'm intrigued by that bracelet. It looks like one I used to know. Would you mind if I bought you lunch? Maybe just a quick bite? I'd like to hear more about it. And about you." His initial goal, crystallizing in that moment of shock, was singular. Find out the origin of that bracelet. Everything else, the earnings call, the server latency, the carefully ordered world of Grayson Cole, faded into insignificance. This encounter, this girl, this impossible piece of silver had just irrevocably shattered his ordinary world. The quick bite turned into an hour at a nearby diner. Grayson canceling his meeting with a curt text message that likely sent ripples of panic through his executive team. Ellie, initially wary and overwhelmed by his intensity and the crisp $100 bill clutched in her hand, slowly relaxed as Grayson steered the conversation away from the bracelet initially, asking instead about her school, her interests, her life. She spoke hesitantly about living with her mom, Sarah, in a small apartment on the other side of town, about Sarah working long hours at a discount superstore, and about her own efforts washing cars to help pay for school supplies or the occasional treat. When Grayson gently brought the conversation back to the bracelet, Ellie couldn't offer much more. "Mom just always said it was mine, that I should never take it off. She found it somewhere a long time ago, I think, before I can remember clearly." Her vagueness felt genuine, not evasive. She seemed to regard the bracelet as a simple fact of her existence, like her brown hair or the scar above her eyebrow, from falling off a swing, she explained. Grayson, careful not to alarm her, masked his churning thoughts behind a calm facade. He saw echoes, perhaps imagined, in her mannerisms, the way she tapped her fingers on the table when thinking, a slight tilt of her head when listening intently. Faint ghosts of Amelia, or just wishful thinking. He couldn't be sure, but the bracelet was proof of something. He improvised a plan. "Ellie," he said, leaning forward slightly, "washing cars in that lot. It's not safe, and you're clearly bright. How about this? My company has a fleet of vehicles. They always need cleaning. I could use someone reliable, detail-oriented like you seem to be. I'll pay you properly, as an actual employee, after school hours. It would be safer, better pay." He also offered to cover her school supplies and enrollment in an after-school tutoring program he knew Coltech sponsored at the local community center. Ellie's eyes widened. "Really? You do that?" The hope in her voice was palpable. It was an easy arrangement for Grayson to make, leveraging his company's resources under the guise of community outreach. But its true purpose was to keep Ellie close, to learn more, to investigate without raising suspicion. Over the next few weeks, a tentative relationship formed. Ellie thrived with the structure and support. She proved quick-witted and responsible, diligently cleaning the company cars, absorbing information at the tutoring center. Grayson made excuses to check on her, bringing pizza to the company garage, engaging her in conversation. He learned she loved drawing, that she was fascinated by how things worked, asking insightful questions about the AI systems Coltech developed. He cautiously shared stories about his own youth, about his love for technology, even mentioning, "I used to have a little sister. She was curious, just like you." He watched Ellie's face intently for any flicker of recognition, but saw only polite interest. Meanwhile, Grayson hired Michael Tran, the best private investigator in the state, known for his discretion and tenacity. The initial task: a thorough background check on Ellie and Sarah Bennett. Tran worked quickly. Sarah Bennett, mid-40s, had lived in Crestwood for about 10 years, working low-wage jobs, no criminal record here. But before that, her history was murky. Tran found traces of her living in Minneapolis around 2006 to 2008 under a slightly different name, Sarah Beth Jansen. There were hospital records for minor injuries treated at a Minneapolis ER in late 2006. Most significantly, there was no official birth certificate for an Ellie Bennett matching the girl's apparent age. Grayson estimated 14 or 15. She seemingly didn't exist on paper before arriving in Crestwood with Sarah. The investigator's report landed on Grayson's desk like a grenade. Minneapolis, 2006. The time and general location of Amelia's disappearance. A woman with a spotty past. A child with no official records. And a bracelet. Coincidence strained credulity. The stakes skyrocketed. This wasn't just about a piece of jewelry anymore. This was about the very real, terrifying possibility that the girl diligently washing his cars downstairs, the girl whose quick mind reminded him achingly of Amelia, might actually be her. The implications were staggering. What happened to her? And what did Sarah Bennett know? The digital file containing Michael Tran's full report glowed ominously on Grayson's oversized monitor. He'd read it through 3 times, each pass solidifying a conclusion that was both wildly improbable and terrifyingly logical. Tran hadn't just found gaps in Sarah Bennett's past. He'd unearthed concrete links that tightened like a noose around Grayson's fragile hope. Tran had cross-referenced missing persons reports from 2006 with hospital admissions in the greater Minneapolis area. While Amelia's name yielded nothing, Tran's digging uncovered an unidentified Jane Doe admission, a girl estimated to be around 10 years old, at a county hospital 50 miles from where Amelia vanished, just weeks after the disappearance. The girl had been found wandering near a highway interchange, suffering from exposure, dehydration, and significant head trauma resulting in amnesia. She had no identification, only minor cuts, bruises, and a distinctive, handmade silver star bracelet on her wrist. Hospital records noted the bracelet description meticulously. The girl had been discharged after several weeks into the temporary custody of social services, listed as requiring long-term placement due to her memory loss and lack of identity. And then, Tran found a connection that made Grayson's blood run cold. A volunteer log from that same county social services office listed as Sarah Beth Jansen, the alias Sarah Bennett had used, signing in multiple times during the period the Jane Doe girl was awaiting placement. Jansen had listed her reason for visiting as inquiring about foster care opportunities. Shortly after Sarah's last log visit, the Jane Doe case file abruptly went cold. There were no further entries, no record of placement, no follow-up. It was as if the girl had simply vanished again, this time from within the system. Combined with the lack of any birth record for Ellie Bennett, Sarah's subsequent move to Crestwood under her current name, and the undeniable presence of the bracelet, the picture became horrifyingly clear. Sarah hadn't just found the bracelet. She had likely found the girl, the amnesiac Jane Doe from the hospital, who was almost certainly Amelia. Sarah, perhaps out of a misguided sense of compassion or desperation, had taken the child from the system's cracks and raised her as her own, burying the past. Grayson stared out at the Crestwood skyline, but he didn't see the familiar buildings. He saw Amelia, 10 years old, lost and alone. He saw her injured, frightened, her memory wiped clean by trauma. He saw Sarah Bennett, likely young and struggling herself, making a fateful, illegal decision. Ellie wasn't 14 or 15. If she was Amelia, she was 28 years old, her life stolen, her development potentially impacted by years of trauma and disconnection from her past. This was the point of no return. The investigators' report transformed suspicion into near certainty. The mystery was no longer if Ellie was connected to Amelia, but how to prove it and what had happened during those lost 18 years. Grayson's objective shifted seismically. It wasn't enough to know about the bracelet. He had to reclaim his sister. He had to confront Sarah Bennett, not just as the mother of the girl he was helping, but as the keeper of Amelia's stolen past. He realized with chilling clarity that this confrontation could shatter Ellie's world, the only world she knew. The stakes were no longer just about finding answers. They were about navigating the potential detonation of multiple lives. He couldn't go back to his detached existence. Amelia, lost for 18 years, was potentially within reach, and he would risk everything to bring her home. The confirmation that Ellie was almost certainly Amelia sent Grayson into an emotional tailspin he hadn't experienced since the raw aftermath of her initial disappearance. Waves of grief, anger, and an almost unbearable hope crashed over him. He paced his office, ignoring calls, the meticulously ordered world of cold tech feeling irrelevant, suffocating. Anger warred with a confusing sense of gratitude towards Sarah Bennett. Anger for the deception, the years lost, the potential damage to Amelia's psyche. Gratitude that she had likely saved Amelia from an unknown, potentially worse fate on the streets or in an overburdened system, and had clearly provided some measure of care, however flawed. He knew he couldn't simply storm into their apartment, make accusations, and demand his sister back. Ellie, Amelia, was the priority. She was 28, but in many ways, she was still the traumatized child Sarah had found. Unraveling her identity, her entire life story, had to be handled with extreme sensitivity. What memories remained locked away? What would the shock of revelation do to her? Grayson leveraged his resources, making discreet calls. He consulted Eleanor Vance, a top-tier family law attorney, outlining the hypothetical situation, understanding the legal complexities surrounding identity recovery, potential custody issues, though Ellie was an adult, and Sarah's culpability. Vance advised securing definitive proof, DNA, before taking any irreversible steps. He also reached out through a trusted contact to Dr. Ramirez, a clinical psychologist specializing in trauma and memory loss in adults. Ramirez emphasized the need for a controlled environment for any revelation, therapeutic support for Ellie/Amelia throughout the process, and warned that memory recovery, if it happened at all, could be fragmented, painful, and incomplete. His plan began to form, moving from raw reaction to calculated strategy. First, he needed irrefutable proof, a DNA comparison between himself and Ellie. Second, he had to confront Sarah, not just to confirm her story, but to gauge her willingness to cooperate and understand her motivations. Third, if the DNA confirmed identity, he needed a plan for revealing the truth to Ellie/Amelia, ideally with professional support. The internal conflict was intense. Part of him wanted to call the police immediately to see Sarah held accountable for 18 years of abduction by deception. But the other part, the fiercely protective older brother, knew that involving law enforcement prematurely could traumatize Ellie further and potentially alienate Sarah, the only mother she'd ever known. He decided on a direct, private confrontation with Sarah first. He needed her side of the story, her cooperation for the DNA sample from Ellie, which could perhaps be obtained under a plausible medical pretext if necessary, though honesty felt crucial, and her participation in whatever came next. He spent days rehearsing the conversation in his head, preparing for denial, anger, tears. He gathered his evidence. Copies of Tran's report, the hospital admission detail for the Jane Doe, the volunteer logs linking Sarah to the facility, and, most importantly, a clear photograph of 10-year-old Amelia wearing the unmistakable silver star bracelet. He felt a tremor in his hands as he looked at the photo, her bright, hopeful smile a stark contrast to the hardships etched on Ellie's young old face. He knew this confrontation was fraught with risk. It could backfire spectacularly. Sarah could deny everything, disappear with Ellie, or the shock could destabilize Ellie. But inaction was no longer an option. He had to move forward, armed with evidence, a nascent plan, and the terrifying, exhilarating conviction that he was finally on the verge of finding his lost sister. The weight of the next step felt immense, the potential fallout catastrophic, but the possibility of bringing Amelia home eclipsed all fear. Grayson chose a Tuesday evening, calling Sarah Bennett first to say he wanted to drop by and discuss a potential scholarship opportunity Ellie might qualify for through a Coltech Foundation initiative. It was a plausible pretext, leveraging the help he'd already been providing. Sarah agreed, her voice betraying a slight nervousness, perhaps sensing something more significant was coming. The apartment building was in a run-down part of Crestwood, the hallways smelling faintly of stale cooking oil and disinfectant. Sarah opened the door to their small, cramped apartment, looking tired but wary. Ellie was at the small kitchen table, sketching intently in a notebook Grayson had given her. She looked up and smiled brightly when she saw him. "Hi, Mr. Cole." That smile, so open and trusting, sent a pang through Grayson's heart. How would the truth affect her? After a few minutes of strained small talk about Ellie's progress at the tutoring center, Grayson steered the conversation towards his real purpose. He asked Ellie if she wouldn't mind putting on some music with headphones in her room while he spoke privately with her mother about the scholarship details. Ellie readily agreed, grabbing her sketchbook and disappearing behind a curtain that served as a door. Once they were alone, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Grayson took a deep breath. "Sarah," he began, keeping his voice level despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "This isn't just about a scholarship. It's about Ellie. And it's about this." He slid the clear photograph of 10-year-old Amelia across the worn kitchen table. Amelia, smiling, wearing the silver star bracelet. Sarah's face went sheet white. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with panic. She stared at the photo, then at Grayson, speechless. "This is my sister, Amelia," Grayson continued softly but firmly. "She disappeared 18 years ago near Minneapolis. I made this bracelet for her myself." He then laid out the other pieces. The Jane Doe hospital admission matching Amelia's description and timeline, the head trauma, the amnesia, the bracelet noted in the file. He mentioned the volunteer logs placing Sarah at the facility, the disappearance of the Jane Doe girl from the system shortly after, and a lack of any birth record for Ellie Bennett. "I know Ellie is older than she looks, Sarah," Grayson said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know she suffered a trauma. I believe you found her, perhaps took her from social services when you were young and scared yourself. I need you to tell me the truth." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. Her shoulders shook. For a moment, she seemed about to deny it. Then her composure crumbled completely. Sobs racked her body. Through broken words, the story tumbled out, confirming Grayson's deductions and the PI's findings. She'd been barely 18 herself, homeless volunteering at the shelter attached to social services partly for a warm place to be. She'd seen the quiet, lost girl with the haunted eyes and the pretty bracelet, learned she had no memory, no identity. Fearful the girl would be lost in the system forever, and driven by a desperate loneliness of her own, Sarah had impulsively walked her out one afternoon and never looked back. She gave her the name Ellie, fabricated a past, moved away, always looking over her shoulder, loving the girl fiercely while simultaneously terrified of discovery. I know it was wrong, she wept, clutching the edge of the table. But she was all I had. I didn't know what else to do. I just wanted to keep her safe. Grayson listened, his anger softening into a complex mix of pity and residual frustration. Sarah's actions were illegal, selfish even, but also born of desperation and a twisted form of love. She needs to know who she is, Sarah, Grayson said gently. And I need confirmation. We need to do a DNA test. For her sake. For legal identity. Sarah nodded mutely, tears still flowing. Okay, she whispered. Whatever you need. Grayson arranged for a discreet mobile phlebotomist service, explaining to Ellie that Mr. Cole needed a routine health screening for his foundation's participants, and it was easier to do hers and Sarah's at the same time. Ellie, trusting him implicitly, complied without question. The samples were collected, sent off under coded identifiers. The final test was underway. Now, all they could do was wait. The days that followed were agonizing, filled with a tension so thick it was almost unbearable, poised on the brink of a revelation that would change everything. The email notification chimed softly on Grayson's phone, an innocuous sound that sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through his system. It was from the DNA lab. He'd been in a virtual board meeting, discussing market projections with feigned interest, his mind entirely consumed by the pending results. Excusing himself abruptly, he retreated to the privacy of his office, his hands trembling as he navigated to his secure inbox. He clicked open the encrypted file. Rows of genetic markers filled the screen, meaningless to his untrained eye. But the bottom, in clear, unambiguous text, was the conclusion. Probability of kinship, sibling 99.9998%. The genetic profile of sample B, Ellie Bennett, is consistent with being the full biological sibling of sample A, Grayson Cole. The words swam before his eyes. He read them again, and then a third time. 99.9998%. It was definitive. Ellie was Amelia, his sister. Found. Alive. A strangled sob escaped him, followed by another. The dam of emotion he'd held back for days, for years, finally burst. Tears streamed down his face. Tears of relief, grief, disbelief, and overwhelming joy. He sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands, letting the raw emotion wash over him. She was alive. After 18 years of haunting silence, his little sister was alive. He immediately called Dr. Ramirez, the psychologist, arranging an urgent session for the following day at a neutral, private location. He then called Sarah, his voice thick but steady. The results are back, Sarah. It's confirmed. She's Amelia. He heard Sarah's sharp intake of breath, followed by quiet weeping on the other end of the line. The next day, in the calm, quiet setting of Dr. Ramirez's consulting room, Grayson and Sarah sat with Ellie/Amelia. Dr. Ramirez gently guided the conversation, explaining that sometimes people experience significant events when they're young that their minds protect them from remembering clearly. Grayson, his heart pounding, then spoke, telling Ellie about his beloved little sister, Amelia, who disappeared long ago, showing her the photograph again. He explained about the bracelet, about the DNA test confirming their connection. Ellie, he said softly, his eyes locked with hers, which were wide with confusion and dawning realization. Your name is Amelia. You're my sister. Ellie, Amelia, stared at him, then at Sarah, then down at the bracelet on her wrist. Her brow furrowed, a flicker of something unreadable, pain, confusion, a ghostly echo of memory, crossing her face. She didn't speak immediately, but tears began to well in her eyes. She reached out hesitantly and touched the photograph of her younger self. It wasn't a dramatic movie moment of instantly recovered memory, but a quiet, profound, and deeply emotional recognition of a truth long buried. The climax was the confirmation, the gentle revelation, and the first fragile step towards reclaiming a lost identity. The months following the revelation were a complex tapestry of healing, adjustment, and forging new family bonds. Amelia, she decided to reclaim her birth name, though she often still answered to Ellie, began intensive therapy with Dr. Ramirez to process the trauma of her past and the shock of her recovered identity. Memories surfaced sporadically, flashes of the park, a feeling of fear, snippets of her childhood home, but a full, linear recollection remained elusive. The focus shifted from recovering the past to building a future. Grayson reunited Amelia with their mother. The meeting was tearful, overwhelming, but ultimately cathartic, beginning the slow process of mending their fractured family. Understanding Sarah's complex role, the woman who had both hidden Amelia and saved her, Grayson chose compassion over retribution. He ensured Sarah received legal counsel and, given her cooperation and Amelia's clear attachment to her, authorities agreed to forego charges in exchange for her testimony about the circumstances under which she found Amelia, which offered no clues about any initial abductor. Grayson, fulfilling a promise, helped Sarah find stable housing and a job within Colteca's community outreach division, ensuring she remained a supportive figure in Amelia's life, albeit in a redefined role. Amelia moved in with Grayson initially, into a world vastly different from the one she'd known. She slowly navigated her new reality, enrolling in specialized educational programs to bridge the gaps left by her lost years, her love for drawing blossoming into a potential path towards design. She kept the silver star bracelet, now polished and gleaming, a symbol not of loss, but of survival and rediscovery. Inspired by their journey, Grayson established the Amelia Star Foundation, dedicating significant Coltec resources to supporting organizations that aid missing and exploited children and funding research into trauma-induced amnesia. The story, eventually shared cautiously with the media by Grayson to raise awareness for his foundation, resonated deeply, a testament to hope and perseverance. Their family, once shattered by loss, was slowly knitting itself back together, forever changed but facing the future with newfound purpose. The poor girl washing cars and the grieving So had found more than loose change and a familiar bracelet. They had found each other, proving that even after years of darkness, stars and sisters could be found again.